Welcome, everybody, to Said Differently, the show sponsored by Troupe and the place where we dive into stories and ideas about stories, about how you tell the story of your company to the market, i.e., messaging. And my name is Jennifer Sikora. I'm your host. I'm also an advisor for Troupe, and I'm really excited to welcome today Scott Heimgartner, who is with Liberis Consulting, who is a partner of Troupe's. But Scott, hi. Let you introduce yourself and Liberis for just a moment.
Yeah, again, I'm Scott Heimgartner. I've been with Liberis Consulting for probably the better part of 6 months now, working alongside a couple colleagues of mine, focusing in on product marketing and more specifically technology product marketing, with deeper expertise in things like supply chain tech and procurement tech, where
Yeah.
we really spent a lot of time focusing. Prior to that, I have a lot of years of experience working in corporate as a product marketing individual. First as a contributor, individual contributor, and then probably for the last decade as a product marketing executive, really focusing on building out and scaling the function of product marketing within those organizations that I've worked for.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you are the perfect person for today's topic, which is really about that bringing together that alignment of sales and marketing on taking that story, your company's story to market, and how can you really get better at that as a collaborative team. One of the reasons we call Troupe is because it's not an individual performance, it's a group collective performance, and that's what happens when you execute messaging to the market. It really brings back to me early parts of my career when I was even back at Golden Gate Software. They called it field marketing, but I was told, hey, you need to train the sales organization on the messages and how we're going to go to market and the type of personas we want to target and the use cases we want to position to the market. And then you can't just do that and just let it go. It has to continually be a close collaboration. Otherwise, things are going to fall apart. So I'm curious, Scott, with your background, both as an in-house product marketer and now as an advisor for companies, what do you see as some of the primary causes, the root causes for what creates misalignment between those two teams?
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come down to trust, right? I think
Mm.
trust in the partnership and trust in the value that product marketing can deliver. I also think too, and I'm going to come at this maybe more from the perspective of somebody that has been in a leadership position tasked with driving the function of product marketing. I often have seen where the objectives of what they're trying to achieve are not aligned. So, as me as a leader of product marketing, what I've done, and I probably learned this a little bit later in my career, is first tying to those objectives that the head of sales really cares about or the head of marketing really cares about, because that cascades and that drives everything. That really drives the behavior from there. And if you've got that alignment in terms of what those North Stars are, you're always going to have some disagreement in the kind of the execution of the tactical aspect of it. But the North Star still holds true, right? It keeps everyone on the same page of what you're trying to achieve. And then from there, the ability to cascade that down to a team and to an individual is that much easier in terms of really driving that behavior and driving that alignment with sales and with marketing. And product marketing, by the very nature of the function, really is in the best position to foster that alignment and to foster that behavior within an organization. So, as example, like some things that I've looked at with sales in my experience. So, like if sales North Star, it might be something like number of opportunities being created or the
Yeah.
bookings to target. It really enables, I think, product marketing to tie our objectives to those outcomes and then build out the strategies and tactics from there. And I've also highly encouraged product marketing, the people that report into me,
Yeah.
um, to embed themselves in sales workflow. Like that certainly means
Yeah.
sitting on discovering calls, listening to if they've got, such technology like Gong or something to listen to some of the recordings and bring a lot of that voice back into the messaging component of it.
Yes.
And even I would build out specific quotas for my team that they had to sit on a certain number of customer calls in a given month or something, but that really helps drive and influence that behavior. And it also drives and influences that collaboration because there's trust there, right? That they're listening
Yeah.
to the buyer, they're listening because the sales, I mean, they hear it day in and day out of what buyers care about, what their challenges are. And if you got somebody that has that empathetic uh, understanding by listening, I think it just inherently builds the trust and drives more alignment there.
Yeah, you brought up a few good points there. The trust thing, I definitely want to stay on that for a moment, but and we're going to come back to the other point, which is this concept of the North Star. But really, what we're talking about are how you're going to measure outcomes. How do you
Yeah.
make this measurable? And so let's come back to that. But staying on trust for a minute, I think, if I were to do the whole said differently thing, said differently could also be the trust is a great way to describe it, but it's also that you mentioned that sales is kind of in the day to day. They're constantly hearing, they're constantly in the front lines of getting that market feedback.
Mhm.
Whereas marketing can sometimes be viewed as a little bit of an ivory tower operation if they're not in the trenches as well, getting that direct market feedback to the messaging and the story, then they're getting it, second degree, third degree, in terms of how many degrees of separation from that market feedback. It is essential that product marketing puts themselves out there right in front of that. You would agree. It's how,
No, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think that also speaks to a little bit of the trust because
Mhm.
uh, I think marketing, not to pick on marketing that much, but I think sometimes there's a little bit of an echo chamber in terms of the messaging that we want to put out there or marketing wants to put out there because sales views that as like you are just completely out of touch with what our buyers are saying, what they care about. That's not even how they talk. And
Yeah.
in product marketing, because they've got that voice of buyer should really be that bridge between sales back into marketing, or more specifically, from the buyer back into marketing, so that messaging really represents the voice of the buyer. And I've seen that quite often. And you start to get when you don't have that voice of buyer aspect, you start to get a little bit of marketing gobbledygook.
Yeah, and you touched on this a little bit already with ways some of the ways you've said you've specifically, you know,
Mhm.
asked your team team being product marketing to get plugged into that, sitting in on calls, going out to events, even going to customer calls, sitting in on
Yeah.
prospect calls, customer calls. What are some other practical ways you would say helps close that gap between those two teams so that there isn't that disconnection or that mistrust?
Yeah, I think when you're bringing new technology, a new product to market, let's say, right? I think from that
Mhm.
go-to-market planning aspect, I always talk about having a launch team, right? And that launch team is going to consist of people from marketing, it's going to consist of people from sales, from people from success, and people from product as well too. But that really gets the team together and aligned a little bit on what is then you also get buy-in too, but what are the core value and what's kind of the core value prop and the messaging pillars that we want to convey to the market about this new widget that we have or that we're
Yeah.
going to be rolling out. But that brings everyone together. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to take messaging of an existing product, let's say, that you have or a solution and try to reframe it because often there's a lot of inherent bias within sales because they kind of know the product and they kind of do
Yeah.
it their own way. But oftentimes, when you've got new technology that you bring into market, you bring everyone to the table so everyone has a voice into that, right? Context. And it drives that alignment. You've got buy-in, you've got support, you've got alignment, and everyone is at least marching to a similar drumbeat. So,
Yeah, that's really great. I love the idea of like having that cross-functional team, so that they become kind of, partners in the battle together. And they see that they can turn to each other, they can give each other those feedback flows much more openly than feeling like they're on completely
yeah.
separate
And
teams.
I've even seen too, because again, because product marketing's, going to be embedded with sales too, like you can almost act a little bit as like that negotiator, right? Because you're hearing things from sales about things that aren't working, right? It might be in something that's as tactical as the leads that are being qualified coming over from marketing. There's oftentimes a lot of disconnect and oftentimes a lot of friction between those two because
Yeah.
marketing's incented to drive more MQL, sales is incented to drive real opportunity. And I think bringing those teams to the table to have a fruitful discussion around what is really a qualified lead, what really determines our like ideal customer, how do we build target accounts? A lot of times product marketing kind of brings those two teams together and because
Yeah.
we're in a really good position to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, one of the things, and I certainly don't want to make this discussion at all about Troupe, but one of the things that Troupe helps product marketers do is do this at great scale, right? So no matter how large your sales organization is, as you're recording all of those calls, no human being can possibly listen to all of them. So Troupe becomes those eyes and ears for you with the AI. It ingests all that and interprets
Yeah.
it and determines what patterns are happening in your messaging against the story you actually want to be telling. But one of the things that's a challenge for product marketers, I'm sure, is the squeaky wheel, right?
Mm.
Which is that you hear from somebody in the sales organization who is very loud and vocal about perhaps maybe the last really good call they had or the last really bad call they had. And now you're hearing about messaging and you're getting a data point, but it doesn't necessarily suggest a broader pattern, right? So, how can product marketing also and the marketing team work with the sales organization to understand when is something actually becoming much more of a patterned issue or challenge versus, well, maybe you were talking to the wrong persona, or maybe you didn't quite deliver the message the way you should have. How do you
Yeah.
start to decipher all that and weed through that noise?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question too. I mean, there's I think several ways that I've often kind of employed to because I get kind of the squeaky wheel component of it. I think the biggest thing that at least that I have found is doing like proper win-loss, like actually diving deep and doing like a deal anatomy of like how that deal was constructed. Because to your point, there's going to be the squeaky wheel that reflects upon the last deal that they had that they won, right? But I think what you can start to do through like a proper win-loss is start to emerge some of those. I mean, to your point, maybe it isn't the perfect persona, or maybe it just isn't the right, it isn't the right kind of company or customer that we should even be targeting. But I think that starts to unearth a lot of those insights and you build those up into patterns. Now, you're always going to have to deal with a squeak wheel. I get sales. I understand too. There are ways to kind of address and tackle that. But
Yeah.
I think that also comes down to discipline as a product marketer to make sure that you're carving out at least 60 to 70 to 80% of your time focused on doing win-loss, focused on doing customer insights, focused on working with sales on how do we develop messaging for the next personas that we want to reach, how do we build out objection handling, like all of those things too. But then you're also going to get the squeaky wheels too. That says, hey, I need more battle cards. Hey, I need help with this one deal. Hey, I need, so I think making sure that you almost have to become a product manager and build like a list of like, these are the things that I'm tackling this week that's going to fit into my sprint. I've got 20% of my time allocated to that. I can
Yeah.
build out like these things. That's all I can deliver this week. The rest of the 80% is focused here. So those are some ways that you can kind of deal with that. But I think, you got to stay true to the function of product marketing, which is being that voice of the buyer, right? And doing the proper win loss and looking for those patterns and some of those themes, because I think that drives a lot of that intel and insights back into the organization and really shapes your approach to go to market versus always trying to chase the squeaky wheel.
That's great. And I think, you talking about the win-loss metric, not
Mhm.
just, well, there's two things there. There's a metric of win-loss, and there's also the story behind the win
Right.
or the loss. But getting back to, you had talked in your opening, Scott, about the North Star being, what are we measured on? What outcomes are we ultimately looking for? Wins are certainly what we're looking for.
Yep.
But so, like, when we think about the metrics that we're looking at together in terms that may indicate better collaboration versus not so good collaboration between sales and marketing. I know for us, within the Troupe product, we're looking at conversion metrics from stage to stage. So not just the ultimate win, but like, is there a stage where we're seeing drop off trends that are going in the wrong direction or in the better direction? But like, what are some of your thoughts, Scott, on what we should be measured on collectively as a joint group, like sales and marketing? What metrics should we be both be paying attention to that we share?
Yeah, great question. I think it's something that pretty much everyone that has been in the role of product marketing probably struggles with from time to time of around what those core set of metrics are that they should really care about.
Yeah.
Because as you know, it's not, product marketing is often just a function that doesn't really have, we don't really truly own a core metric, right? At least it's not very explicit or not well spelled out with a lot of companies because it's kind of this, I don't know, it's this function that really drives collaboration enablement. How do you measure positioning? How do you, until Troop
Oh,
came along?
we're certainly trying to change
Yeah.
that,
How do you
Troop, but
measure message, but just things like that as well too. Again, I always step back and I've always said that, when aligning product marketing to a core set of metrics, I think the ones best served are just the ones that are closest to revenue. If we can get as close to revenue
yeah.
in terms of what drives our objectives, if we can get as close to revenue, to me, I think that not only signifies that, hey, we're really focused on driving impact, but we're also focused on driving collaboration as well, too, right? And building out kind of those North Stars. And I think once you anchor there, I think it then becomes just much easier to cascade, into individual and team metrics to create that accountability. So things that, again, if I'm looking at the marketing team, if I'm looking at a marketing leader, there's going to be things that I am going to want to share in in those specific metrics, right? So it could be quite as simple as just the number of, MQLs for that quarter, right? That typically is usually what head of marketing might care about. It might be something around um, brand recognition, right? Or share of mind. But like, what are those top like elements that I think a head of marketing really cares about? And then how can we align to that as product marketing? Because we are in a position to help influence a lot of those metrics as well, too.
It's
And certainly
very true.
sales too. Oh,
Yeah, the influence thing, product marketing can certainly, step up and really kind of be assertive within the organization about where more influence can be made. As a former head of marketing myself, I certainly would encourage any head of marketing to look beyond the MQL, right? You
mhm.
have to see what happens at the next handoff and even the handoff after that. Because if sales is not taking those leads and then converting them to an actual opportunity, then your MQLs, I'm sorry, they're garbage, right?
Yeah.
Or there's something broken in the handoff process that needs to be addressed. But if
It's
product marketing is seeing that drop off, and they need to call attention and raise the alarm bell to that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to your point too, with MQL, it's always a metric I kind of get a little bit squeamish on because I
Yeah,
think, and listen, I know, that's often how marketing is measured at the end of the day. I mean, I've seen it, and I don't always think it's the right metric, but it does lead to a little bit of short-term thinking.
totally.
Always chasing, the number of MQLs from week to week and month to month, and you can kind of game that. And I think that again, there's so many other factors that's going to influence that. I think kind of stepping back from a marketing perspective in looking at like how can we share with sales on driving pipeline, it
That's right.
might be a better measurement of the effectiveness of marketing, or even step back and say, what about like metrics around like market share, right? What are we
Yeah.
trying to achieve for the next quarter, for the next year in terms of market share or
Yeah.
awareness with analysts? If analysts is a big part of your strategy, like share of mind with analysts, like I think there's other ways to look at it from a marketing perspective. But then product marketing can come in and says, listen, we can align there with you. We can be on the same page here because we can heavily influence that. And then from there, it becomes okay. Let's cascade this down into what our quarterly objectives are, and maybe our monthly objectives are. Then we start to look at things like sales confidence and messaging, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
doing quick surveys, right? Are we seeing that sales confidence tick up? If not, we need to make some adjustments, right? And just
Yeah.
an early, signal before, that performance starts to show up in pipeline. I think you can look at, things like usage analytics, right? Because you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into creating battle cards and value prop cards and competitive
Yes.
guides and all of these things. And if it's not being pulled from your CRM or not being pulled from your enablement hubs, then what's
Right.
the point? So looking at that usage, and if it's down, let's go have a conversation with sales to understand why. Like what is happening? Is it just simply accessibility? Do they not know where it is? Is it too hard to find to click here, click here, click here, click here? How do we serve that up better? Or maybe just the content's bad, it's stale, there's no
Yeah.
trust in it.
That's right. Right.
And then I will say too, again, just a shout out with Troupe here is that, with Troupe, I think, you know, you guys help by tracking messaging alignment at scale using real numbers and hard numbers. And for the first time, in my opinion, that is a really good indicator to really understand how your core foundational message resonates with your target audience, right? In a metric driven, quantifiable approach to that, right? So it really just helps you to understand, is your messaging sticking? Is it not sticking? Are the things that are being unearthed from other reps that are finding success, but they're not on point? Well, let's go investigate that.
Yeah, we didn't even have time to get into that today, which is the sort of like the hidden gems out there that are being spoken that you often don't hear about till much
Yeah.
later. But that'll be for another show. Well, Scott, I want to end this with a sort of provocative question, which is, I'd love your thoughts, and I'll give everyone mine. Given the dynamic of this, who should ultimately own messaging and the story for the company?
That, well, okay, well, my perspective obviously is going to be a bit biased. I think if an organization that truly values voice of the market, voice of the buyer, takes an outside in approach to how they go to market, product marketing should be in the best position to own that. Like there should be accountability on
Hmm.
product marketing owning messaging, right? And what does that mean? That means that that's messaging that you've developed or that the team has developed that's rooted in buyer insights, that's tested, that's validated, and that's enabled out to the organization. So that's enabled to sales in terms of, again, tactical things like battle cards and value prop guides and use case guides. It's also enablement for marketing as well too, right? So as they're crafting the stories, as they're crafting a lot of the copy of the web and all of that stuff, there's a foundational piece around messaging that they can attach themselves to really understand what's the core message we're trying to deliver, and what are the buyers that we care about and that we're targeting. What do they care about, and how do we talk to them, right? And that's kind of what the messaging is intended to do.
Yeah, great. I think my answer is fairly close to yours, but with a layer on top of it. My opinion is that it should be the CEO. However,
It's interesting.
the product marketer is responsible for activating and making sure that that story is executed. I think the CEO, however, needs to have the data That's the problem. Is like you have sales and marketing, they've got lots of opinions. And as we've talked about in this, you need actual data about what's working well, what's not working well, how's it moving things through the funnel, conversions and win rates and all that good stuff. But if the CEO isn't confident in the story, then that's top down. Then you're just going to have
You
dysfunction.
agree.
It's going to be wild, wild west underneath,
That's
you know? So
that's that's an interesting, I think that's an interesting perspective that probably could be another topic for us to deep dive into.
it could. It could. Well, Scott, I've really enjoyed talking with you today. And anybody looking to do a really solid refresh of their messaging and putting in these types of excellent execution processes that Scott talked about, definitely give Liberis a look. And thank you. Any final words before we sign off?
Nah, just really enjoyed it, Jennifer. Thank you for having me, and look forward to future discussions on messaging.
Indeed. All right. Thank you all. Bye.